Hi, I'm Brian Dunn, and welcome to the most important podcast ever. What makes it so important? It's not about me, it's about you. This podcast is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, the moments of resilience, the lessons learned, and the small acts that made a big difference. From retail floors to boardrooms, we'll share the untold stories that shape lives and careers. This week, our guest is Angie Bruhn. I think you will remember, our longtime listeners will remember Angie from episode 30, where she was fantastic. And Angie reached out to me, and we had a great conversation about what's happening in the world and the workplace today. And I think Angie's got some important things to say, and I'm really excited about this conversation. In fact, tonight's conversation feels different to me. Angie first joined me, as I said, on episode 30, but tonight's conversation is going to go somewhere I think much deeper. We share a unique history. We both lived through some of the most disruptive periods in modern retail history. I was sitting in the boardroom. Angie was in the field. Same storm, very different vantage points. We watched technology reshape everything. Y2K, the advent of the internet, Amazon, Netflix, smartphones, on and on and on. We watched entire business models change in real time, and we watched companies people thought would last forever disappear. In fact, Circuit City was featured in the very famous business book, Good to Great. And today, here we are again. Only this time, the disruption is AI. And once again, people are lying awake at night wondering, what happens to my job? What happens to my future? What happens to me? And what makes Angie uniquely qualified for this conversation is that today she works professionally as a coach, helping people navigate transition, disruption, layoffs, identity shifts, uncertainty, in the emotional weight that comes with all of it. Before we start the show, Angie said something that really stayed with me. Angie said, this is affecting 1,000 people a day and many, many more who are lying awake at night wondering if they're next. And honestly, that hit me really hard, because whether it's layoffs, AI, grief, an empty nest, any major life transition, there's a moment where life no longer looks the way you thought it would. And I found myself saying to Angie, when it happens, it feels like wreckage, but it's actually a passage. And as we continue talking, we realize something else. Job loss may be the entry point to this conversation, but the real destination is identity, reinvention, and what comes next. Because this conversation isn't just about jobs. It's about who we are when life changes underneath us, something we both know a lot about. This episode is for anyone trying to find solid ground while life is shifting beneath their feet. Angie, my dear friend, welcome back to the most important podcast ever, and thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I'm honored to be here again and excited to have this conversation. I think the tee up is, and what you described in terms of who this episode is for, is perfect, right? It's for the 1,000 people that are losing their job every day. It's the 63% of Americans who are laying in bed, staring at their ceiling, wondering if they're next. who just watch their colleagues empty out their desk and feel something that they didn't expect to feel, right? Most expect to feel relief, but there's a clinical term called layoff survivor syndrome. And, it affects, like I said, 63% of Americans today who feel guilt for being left behind. And then, as you described, anybody who has felt their life shifting underneath them. I think that this conversation is important, especially considering that May is National Mental Health Awareness Month, right? This is the type of conversation that I think we should be having specifically around what's happening in the market right now with job layoffs.
And we don't typically have it, do we?
Yeah, we don't.
And tell me, Angie, what brought you to this work? I just want to get a little setup of that.
Yeah. So I spent my life in the corporate world, right? Worked with you at Best Buy. Then I left and went to work for Under Armour for some time, came back to Best Buy. And then I ended my career at Tesla. And during that time, I was there for about 6 years. And, we all get a sense, and I know now in this work, research shows that an average executive will sit for 2 years, either knowing something is coming or having a desire to do something different, but not wanting to take that step, right? And so as I found myself telling my peers, hey, you should start to think about what you want to do next, because people don't go to Tesla to retire, right?
Right.
I found myself saying, you should probably ask yourself that same question. And the thing that I knew that I wanted to do was help leaders on a broader scale. Because one of the things, as you know, when you work for innovative, fast-paced, moving organizations, you get an opportunity to see the good, the great, and the ugly from leadership, right? And how they show up or don't show up, and how they show up for their teams or don't show up for their teams. And so that's what I knew that I wanted to do. And so I started getting my coaching certification on the weekends. I would travel, get it done, because I knew at some point my time at Tesla was going to come to an end, and it did. Elon reconstructed the energy division, and overnight I had 412 people that I had to let go. And then I sat for 6 months wondering, what do I do next? In that time, I found myself starting to help those 412 people that worked for me, help find jobs, help figure out what they wanted to do. And when I got my exit out, I thought, okay, this is going to be the work. And sure enough, a career transition started to be the front conversation that I was having with folks. And so this exact moment is what my training is in. I have personally lived this myself. And I think that we're at a really unique time, as you so gracefully teed it up, where we've been through this kind of shift before. And the thing that you and I talked about this morning is everybody thinks that their time is different. And I think we'll get into that, right? Every disruption that we've had, whether it be Circuit City disappearing or Amazon coming in, that for us was this, the world is going to come to an end. Literally, actually, Y2K, right?
Right.
Well, the world is going to come to an end. And here we are on the other side of that. And I think that, AI, as disruptive as it is, there's a lot to be said about we've been here before. And sometimes we just need to remember who we are. And I think that's why this conversation is timely.
Yeah, I think that's right. And one of the things that I'd love you to talk about, because I thought it was so interesting. A lot of what makes people good executives, good salespeople, is this go, 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 and go get it done. But when you're at ground zero, what you talked about, I think is really compelling. And that is this idea of, what do you do on the day it happens?
Yeah. The first 72 hours, right? Because instinct is going to tell you, and everyone in your network that you call or calls you is going to say, all right, get going, get the resume done, get your LinkedIn profile updated, start applying for jobs tonight, right? If you do that, everything that you do will be coming from a place of fear, right? Because you shake hands, you say your goodbyes, you send the email out, and you're graceful, right? Your exit's graceful. You get in the car and you start driving home, and fear starts to set in.
For sure.
How am I gonna tell my spouse? How am I gonna pay my bills? Right? What am I gonna do next? Those are the questions, and all of that is laid in fear, right? And so if you go home and you start taking action right away, every decision you make is going to be grounded in that same fear that you started to feel on the way home. And so what I tell people in that first 72 hours is do nothing. Do nothing. You've got to let the emotion come through you, because and the thing that I promise is, on the other side of that real honest silence, you're going to feel better. And now when you start to take action and you start to think about, okay, who do I become now? What do I do next? The decisions that you make that will help you get there are going to feel different than if you started it in it sitting in that fear.
Yeah. I think it's so important. What you say there is so important. You got to let the sun rise the next day. And maybe the day after that, just to make sure, okay, good, check. Yeah, life is going to continue to go on here. And then you get to, and I was thinking about this after our talk today, you get to sort of decide what gives me energy? What do I want to do? So you're
Yeah.
operating from a place that isn't fear based, but is more desire based. What do I want to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and that's that question of what do I do next, or what do I want to do? I think is, when you're 20 and when you're 30, the layoff, yeah, it stings, right? I mean, it sucks, no doubt. But when you're 40 or 50 or 60, it feels different,
Oh, yeah.
right? It definitely, I mean, there is it feels different. I mean, this is the people that I work with. This is where they sit, right? And the thing about it is, when you remember who you are and you take that title away and you say, it doesn't matter that I don't have X title at X organization. I have the skills and the experience, right? When you start to remember that, then all of a sudden the conversation, to your point, becomes, I've earned my stripes,
Yeah.
right? I've
Yep.
put my time in. And those who can confidently say that and remember who they are, all of a sudden it's like, to your point, like, what do I want? Where did I gain the most fulfillment in the work that I've done in the past? Where did I gain the least fulfillment in the work that
Right.
I've done in the past? Right?
Not only that, but it's also, I think, and maybe I'm speaking, I'm looking in the mirror, maybe. You got
Mhm.
to remember, you get to remember who you are, because our identities get so wrapped up in titles and our jobs, when that's not who we are, it's what we do. And
Yeah.
those are two very different elements.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly right. We spend an average human spends 92,000 hours of their life working. It's 66% of the time that they're awake. And so, no doubt that your identity is completely wrapped up in that job title and who you, in that thought of what you do. Right. And I've had clients ask me, in the middle of all of it, "Oh, what do I tell people who I am at a cocktail party?"
Right.
Right? Because you're so used to saying, somebody asks you that question, so used to saying, well, I'm a CTO, or I'm a CMO, or I'm head of technology, or I'm this, or I'm that. At the core, to your point, that's not who you are.
Right.
That's what you do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is critical in that moment. And it's, what do my kids think? What do the neighbors think? What does my
Mhm.
community think? You got to go through all that stuff. That's why I love your 72 hours so much. And that's not enough time to process all of it, but it's enough time to breathe and to
Yeah.
recognize that the world's going to keep moving along. You just got to figure out how you want to participate in that.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, see the sunrise, right?
Yep. Yep. I think that's so important. Um, and this transitional thought that it's not about a job, it's about my identity, who I am, I think is so, so important. Angie, as we sit here and people are thinking about, I can see a big disruption coming, and you and I have both seen a lot of disruptions coming. It's real easy to just ignore it, and I'll deal with that when that comes, if it comes. How do you wish your clients would think about that?
Hmm. So here's what I wish. I wish that that's a great question. I wish that instead of waiting, they would have more intention and choose to act differently, right? And so the thing about we'll use AI as an example, okay? It's here. It's been here. We've seen it coming down the pipeline, right? Do you remember that movie? Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold that I'm working through. Have you seen the movie oh, it's the women who go to work for NASA, who are working for NASA.
Hidden Figures.
Hidden Figures, right? So if you remember in that movie, right? So you've got a group of women working at NASA they're doing accounting, right? And NASA gets the first big IBM computer and it's all set up in a room, right? And the woman who was never allowed to become a supervisor continues to walk past that room. And what does she do? She says, "This is coming. So I'm going to teach myself how to use it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get others. I'm going to grab my people and I'm going to show them how to use it too." Right? She did that intentionally. She didn't just sit and wait for something to happen. She saw it coming and she took action. Right? And I think that's the thing that we all need to do. First of all, AI is only as good as the human inputting information into it. Right? And if we are scared of it, and if we try to run from it or try to ignore it and say, okay, it's going to pass, then we're going to fall behind. Right?
Mhm.
So the key is to say, okay, what can I learn? Where can I start to apply this work? Right? And be intentional about what do I do and how do I learn it? Just like we had to learn.
Yeah. I remember one year, I'm trying to remember what year it was. I was a district manager, so it was in the 90s. In my performance area, my personal development area was I had to learn how to use a PC. I'm so embarrassed to even say that out loud. The technical crew here is nodding their heads like, yeah, that explains a lot. But
What
do
is
you
it?
hear
What?
this?
No, what is it?
Hey, cancel. I said something that triggered ChatGPT or something and it started chirping at me,
So funny.
parroting what I said, which speaks to your point. It's only as good as the inputs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But my point is, the only way you're going to learn and get comfortable with this, you have two choices. You can stick your head in the sand and pretend it's not coming, and your point's the right one. It's already here. It's been here for a long time.
Yeah.
It's just now out in the mainstream. But you have to get comfortable with it. And will some companies use it to just be more efficient and to save money? Yes. But I think the winners are going to be those that learn how to unleash it, how it can unleash the productivity of their people, what they can do more that they couldn't access before.
Yeah. Well, humanize, right? You think about what when Amazon came to town, right? And we thought we were just selling TVs, right? We were just selling gadgets, right? But that's not what we were doing. We were selling our knowledge and
That's
our
right.
expertise, and that feeling when someone walked into the store of being welcomed and a place to come and be, right? And to learn. The only technology, if you think about this, for the time that, at least for my period of time, right, that I was there, the only technology that did not change was appliances. Nobody's messing with the refrigerator,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But everything else did. I mean, BlackBerry, smartphone made BlackBerry obsolete in 18 months. As soon as we thought we had it,
Yep.
and then something else came along. And I remember, here's what actually, maybe this is a good example for those listening. I remember when people would go do competitive walks, right? And I would send my team of managers out to do competitive walks at Circuit or at Radio Shack. And they'd come back and they would say, oh, they're horrible at this and this sucks. And I see the same thing with AI. People are all over social media, just like, oh, AI is terrible. And they're angry. They're
Oh
angry,
yeah. Oh yeah.
right? And I used, when they'd come back, when I'd have my team come back and they would say, oh, they were awful, they did this and that, I'd say it's really easy to notice the bad in the competition, right? And I'm going to put AI on that because a lot of people feel AI is competition, right? It's really easy to do. It's very simple minded, because if you can look at it and say, they did this better, they did this great, right? AI does this wonderfully. Now all of a sudden you say, I should step up my game. I
Yep.
need to do something different,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
But instead, we get caught up in this, like, oh, it's awful. It's going to take everybody's job.
So you want to get confirmation bias that it's terrible, right? You have
Yes.
confirmation bias that it's
Yes.
terrible. And
Thank you.
so the right thing to do is to ignore it. And it's not the right thing to do. The right thing to do is to train it in service of you, what you want it to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I
Mm-hmm.
think. You know, it's interesting because the idea of disruption being an event and then it's back to normal, I think it's been evolution all along. I think we're constantly evolving. And I think some of our leadership models have been slower to evolve. And I think this new world we're in isn't new at all. It's just the next level of evolution
Mm-hmm.
and how we play in it. And you know what? It's a legitimate choice not to play in it, but all of a sudden, your choices become really narrow, don't they?
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
Yeah. Um, so, your advice to people today is get their hands on it.
Yeah, if so, my advice, if that's the specific issue, if the fear that you have today is around AI is going to take my job, if that's your fear, then get your hands on it. Now, if it's something different, right, which you have people all day long that are sitting waiting for something to happen because they're bored, they lack fulfillment, they don't believe in the mission of the organization anymore, they don't trust the people that they work for anymore. That's a different story, right? There's
Yep.
different recommendations for that. But if
Yep.
AI is specifically the thing that you're sitting there saying, I don't know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow because AI is going to take my job,
Yep.
right?
But, and we're talking about AI only because it's the big shiny object in
Yeah.
the room right now.
Yeah.
But this is actually true for life in general, isn't it?
Yeah. And yes.
I wonder, and by the way, I think a lot of the AI angst is a lot of general free floating angst that's getting wrapped up in that balloon.
So Brian, can I go somewhere personal with you?
Sure, of course.
So when you think about, yes, career and the job layoff, that's the entry point into this conversation, right? AI just happens to be the biggest disruptor right now that we're dealing with. But to your point earlier about identity, and you think about for you personally, right? When you're no longer the CEO of Best Buy, when the boys move out and you lose your wife, who did you become?
Yeah. I to answer that to you, when I left Best Buy, it was so tough, so tough when Best Buy and I separated because I had played a hand in building it, you know,
Mhm.
and um, what I became then, and this was a blessing and a curse. I was able to dedicate my time, my life, to taking care of Susie, and I got to spend 3.5 years with her. That was amazing and difficult and the hardest work I ever did and the biggest blessing I ever had being in a position to be able to do that. But it really, to tell you the truth, Angie, towards the end when things were very difficult, I would have traded every single thing I had for another week or another month.
Mhm.
And it really, in a very tough way, showed me my identity wasn't as a CEO of a Fortune 50 company. My identity was the most important job I had was my family, my beloved wife, and my three sons. Still is. My three sons still are my most important job, although they don't need as much as they used to.
Yeah.
And as you said, they're off living their lives. So what I became is Brian. And I had to learn to love being Brian,
Mm.
and I do. And then that's how I found this podcast.
Yeah.
And so it took me years to decouple what I did with who I am. And it's made me a better person. I feel more in touch with the world. I'm kinder, I'm gentler, I am more empathetic, I think. And I sort of ask you the same question, Angie.
Yeah.
What have you learned from your changes and your challenges?
Yeah. I'll go there, but if I can, if it's okay if I
Go
say one
ahead. Go
thing.
ahead.
The reason why I asked that question is because I think, we started the conversation with who this episode is for, right?
Yep.
And I think that feeling of who do I become now is at the core what people are asking themselves. And it's different for everybody, right?
Mm.
Except for the losing the job, the losing part of me, all that's somewhat the same feeling, right? It's the grief cycle everyone goes through. But the rapture, the identity rapture underneath it
Mm.
all is what makes it different and unique to the individual, right? And
For sure.
so if you hear stories of how people came, I mean, as we said, wasn't just the job, it was your boys, it was your wife, right? I mean, you went through identity stripping milestones in your life in a very compact, short period of
Yep.
time, right? Within a few
True.
years. And so when you do that, I love what you said. Like, I had to learn to fall in love with Brian, with who I was, right? And you got a gift of time
Mm.
that most people do not have. I'll tell you a quick story and then I'll answer your question. My aunt, who my dad had two siblings, My grandfather lived until he was 99. He just passed away last year. Okay.
Wow.
My grandmother was 93 or 94. She passed a couple years prior. They made it to their 78th wedding anniversary. They buried my dad, and then my grandmother passed, and my grandfather had to bury their youngest son. And so left was my aunt. And my aunt was set to retire. Her husband had retired. She was set to retire. He died, her husband. So, all in a very short amount of time, right? And so it's like we wait and we wait and we wait until this retirement, or we wait until Friday to enjoy life, right? Until some big milestone happens, like, a loss of a job or a loss of a spouse, something significant. And then we look at ourselves and we go, is this even who I want to be, or how I want to be spending my time? But what if people before that big event said, I'm going to figure out how to find joy and fulfillment and love for what I do?
Mm.
How much better would, and love myself, how much better would humanity be if people stopped going after and chasing that thought of who they think society thinks that they should be,
Right.
right? Anyways.
And it's not about not having ambition. It's not about not being competitive. It's about this journey to self-actualization, the journey we never actually complete, right? But it's about enjoying and appreciating all of it in its entirety. And I was guilty of this. I was running hard. You were running hard. And it's real easy to get caught up in, let's turn the treadmill faster because we can do this.
Yeah.
And you you miss things. It's like the line from the Ferris Bueller movie. It's a pretty cool world. And every once in a while, you got to stop and take a look or you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I know that's corny, but it's a thing for me.
Yeah. It's great. But yeah, so the question that you asked
Yep.
was, how did I figure out, right? Or who I became.
Yep.
So like you, my changes were all in a very short amount of time, right? So I became a single mom. Um, I then 2 years later lost my job. I was living away. I lost my dad all in that time, and I lost my mom when I was young. So now I became nobody's daughter. Now I was nobody's daughter. Didn't have my job title. Didn't my relationship was gone, and then my job, right? And then a couple years later, I had my cancer diagnosis, right? And that stripped away a part of my identity, and then gave me a part of an identity that I didn't know that I was ever going to have. And so the thing that for me in my reflection in my time was really about figuring out what I wanted to bring to the world, right? And how could I use these, what I call now my scars of authority, right? Between the job loss and all of it, to be in service of others, because I believe that that's my purpose here, right? That's where I gain fulfillment, and joy in my life. And whether that's my kids, or whether that is, people that I'm honored and blessed to be able to help through their moments like this. For me, I had to figure out where in that work I gained fulfillment and joy, and where I did not. And when you are the thing, you talked about the 3.5 years that you got with Susie. The thing when you're on this side of it where it's you and you're the one with the diagnosis, right? And I'm looking at my kids, who, I think I talked about this a little bit in episode 30. Honestly, I was in the middle of radiation, so episode 30 was a little bit of a blur for me. But I'm looking at my kids, and they are the same age that I was when my mom died.
Yeah.
My daughter was 12, right? It was 12 and I was 12. And you're looking at them and you're going, I don't remember my time in middle school, and I surely don't want them to have that same kind of feeling. So then you learn to get strong, but inside you're trying to figure it all out, right? And so I journaled a lot. I think we talked about this earlier today. You learn to be selective about the people that you allow to share their stories with you. Because one of the things I tell my kids all the time is the hardest skill to learn and build as a person, as a human, is the skill of staying positive when everything around you in your world gives you a reason not to. Right. And I'm not talking toxic positivity, but I'm like how you described when you wake up in that next day after you got the job layoff and the sun comes out, it's that, gosh, I'm grateful for the sun being out. I'm grateful for being alive today. Right. I'm grateful that I have a house that I can put a floor that I can put my 2 feet down on. Right. And a pillow and pajamas and all of it, right? And so you start to learn I started to learn how to get really good at finding the joy in the small moments, the things that add up to big things, but we typically take it for granted, right? And I'm still figuring it all out, Brian, as we all are, right? There's 12 spokes on the wheel of life. 12, 13, 14, 15, depending on which wheel you're looking at, right? But most people only talk about one or two or three,
Right. Right.
And it's like, if you could find balance in all of that, gosh, then you've won.
Yeah, I think that's right. What I'd really like to do here, Angie, if you
Yeah.
can stay on,
Yeah.
we're past 30, so I'd love to draw this episode to a close, and then
Okay.
we're going to have a part 2 with Angie. We have a lot of really interesting things to talk about.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that's it for this episode of the most important podcast ever. Please check us out on our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to subscribe. Also, you just got to come back to next week's episode with Angie, because I guarantee you the conversation gets even better. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you to our technical crew here at Streetside Studio 7. And thank you to our hosts, Deja Blue House of Coffee, best cup of coffee in Alexandria and the surrounding communities. We'll see you next week.